And away we go. It's another edition of the Arrowhead Pride Editors Show. My name is Pete Sweeney, and I'm once again joined by my esteemed deputy editor, John Dixon. We also have our Arrowhead Pride podcast producer, Steve Serta, in the house. This is a special episode of the Editors Show because we actually have the game coming up. Usually we are reacting to something that happened the day before, but I think rightfully so. It's called the game of the year. The 8-1 Philadelphia Eagles visit the 7-2 Kansas City Chiefs tonight from Arrowhead Stadium in what is the conclusion of Week 11 in the NFL. And this will be a unique show, right? Because we don't have a ton of new Chiefs news. This game is coming up ahead. So we're going to have a round table with three of us to chat about what we're expecting in tonight's game. And I first want to just pass along some general feelings about the game before we dive into the defensive side of the ball, the offensive side of the ball, so on and so forth. The morning game for me, like in the bye, going into the bye, the one in Germany at 8:30, and then you have a week off, and then you don't play until Monday night. This to me has felt like almost like an Olympic break in hockey where they all go and play in the Olympics or the World Cup. Like it just seems like it's taken forever for the next Chiefs game to come. And for one that is so anticipated, it's added a unique feel, I think, to this game. It's been a long while, it feels like. And John, to me, I'm looking at this game, and I just feel like it has to matter a little bit more to Philadelphia, right? This is a Super Bowl rematch. They're the team that lost. This organization has never beaten Andy Reid. I think about that Denver game a few weeks ago where Kansas City went to Denver and they hadn't won in years and years and years. And that game is always going to matter more. So I just think generally, before we dive into the details of what we think is going to happen on the field, I think Kansas City is going to have to match that energy, which is tough to do just considering this one feels like it naturally will matter more to the Philadelphia Eagles, John.
Well, I agree, but I'm not sure that the difference is as much as we were talking about against the Broncos. A 16-game losing streak to a team in your division,
right?
That's a big hill to be up on top of, to be knocked off of, and I'm not sure this game is quite there. I agree, though, that the Eagles have more motivation to win this game than the Chiefs do on that basis. But on the other hand, we got Andy Reid and the bye, and I think the Chiefs have got a lot of motivation in this game too. I think that you're making a good point about the motivations the Eagles have, though. You made that point in your prediction for this game, which I just saw a few minutes ago, and and I think that was a good one, a good point to make. That the Eagles, from the Eagles side of this, this is more of a revenge game than it is a rematch for the Chiefs.
Yeah, I just think Kansas City's going to have to match that intensity and execution. Not to say that they can't, but that's just a difficult thing to do. You mentioned the Andy Reid point. I thought this was interesting, Steve, and I'll get your general feelings on this matchup here. But Andy Reid has never lost to the Chiefs when he was the head coach of the Eagles, and he has never lost to the Eagles as head coach of the Chiefs. He always wins. Andy Reid always wins the Andy Reid Bowl. Do you think that he will continue that success tonight?
I mean, if we're supposed to believe everything the Eagles players have said all offseason, then there's not a chance the Chiefs win this game because it's on real grass.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, it'll be slick though.
Yeah. Oh, and just so happens that the weather is terrible today in Kansas City for those people that aren't local. It's going to be raining tonight, probably. It's going to be windy. It's going to be cold. But I think 15 days is too much time to have to think about a game like this, because I've seen Chiefs fans doing it. I've been doing it. I've just been going back and forth. Like, early at the start of last week, I was like, I'm picking the Eagles. I just think that they're set up better right now. I think things are working a little bit better, and they're just a really, really talented football team. And as the week went on, I was like, yeah, but Andy Reid and the bye week and everything that he does. And, the Chiefs are still looking for that season-defining offensive performance where they really turn a corner. And there's just so many different storylines in this game. I'm hopeful that it's just a really, really good football game, whether it's the Eagles that win or whether it's the Chiefs that win. I'm just hopeful that we get something that's the same like caliber of product that we got in the Super Bowl, because that was an incredible game. And I think these two teams are really evenly matched, even though they're both quite a bit different than they were in last year's Super Bowl.
Yeah,
I think
Go ahead.
Steve's making a really good point here. I saw someone make a point the other day that I hadn't really fully considered, because the last Chiefs game was in Europe and began at 8:30 in the morning. There are teams that have played 3 games since the
Right.
last time the Chiefs played. Going from a Sunday morning game to a Monday evening game. That's there's a lot of things that have happened in
That's
this
a
league.
That's the
since
biggest break as possible. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
you look around the AFC West. Suddenly, it seems like the Chargers and Raiders are not going to even smell the playoffs,
Yeah.
and the
Mhm.
Broncos win a big game last night. They're back to 5-5. You know, I was one of these people, and I'll tell you now, I thought the Broncos were dead and buried, and they suddenly seem like they're a team that has life and can maybe sneak in to the postseason. And you watched the Buffalo Bills last night; they seem rejuvenated. Where I think everybody was writing them off, and it gets interesting here in the AFC. I want to dive into the details of this game. We're going to do a little bit of a roundtable, defensive side, offensive side, and then we'll make some picks here. But before we do, just a note, John, Richie James was finally activated.
Yep.
In these
Mhm.
past few days, and I'm curious to hear what you think. I don't know if he fits in right now. I mean, there were some rumblings around the trade deadline. It seemed like the Chiefs were trying to see if there was interest elsewhere. I know that some folks have pointed to the James activation and just assume that he's going to be active tonight. But I tend to think there's a chance that he might be inactive, like a healthy inactive, because I think when you're injured and you go get a returner, and all indications from Dave Toub are saying that Mecole Hardman is going to remain the returner. Is there room for a 7th or 8th wide receiver here? I'm just curious to see the inactives, because I wonder about James and whether or not he'll even be up, as they say.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question, and I think you can make the point that he won't be fully acclimatized. But on the other hand, he's been a full participant in practice for 2 weeks, and they haven't activated him, and they
Right.
probably could have at any point during that time,
Mm-hmm.
and chose to wait until after the bye, giving him every opportunity to get fully on board. And apparently he wasn't hurt that badly. I mean, I think he's
Right.
been in pretty good physical shape ever since those conversations were going on about the possibility of trading him. And I I I'm not sure that the Chiefs didn't want him. I just thought that maybe he was the guy they thought they could afford to lose the least, and they wanted to get some of their capital back, is the way I looked at it. I made the point. I was on a radio show this morning, and I made the point that, we don't really know what Richie James can do when he's wearing a red
Right.
and gold uniform. He was hurt in the first weeks of the season, right? And so we don't really know what he can do.
There
And
were times at training camp where he looked pretty good. Like
yeah,
I don't know.
exactly. Yeah. And I wonder if the Chiefs might be rolling him out there tonight and putting him in a role that the Eagles don't expect. There's no tape on him with the
Yeah.
Chiefs. They don't have any idea what he could do.
He
And
would
I
be
could
that proverbial curveball where
yeah.
you put him
Yeah.
on the field. There's no tape. Everything would be unscouted in a way. Steve, you think Richie James is up tonight?
I mean, I kind of feel like I think I'm with you, Pete, where I think I'd be kind of shocked if he's active tonight,
Yeah.
because I feel like
Yeah.
McCole is the return guy, and I would kind of be annoyed if they kind of deploy him in the offense, and like
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh, we spent the bye week designing things for Richie James." Like, do that for Kadarius Toney. Like,
Yeah,
I
it
would
would
be
be quite
annoyed.
the pivot. Yeah, in recent weeks and recent days, they have kind of said that they're easing Kadarius Toney back a little bit to make sure he stays healthy throughout the season. I am curious to see how they use him out of the bye week. We had mentioned for weeks that the bye is usually a point where Andy Reid sort of draws a line in the sand and says, "Okay, what can we do better here?" So I do expect some changes on offense tonight. But let's start with the Chiefs defense. This is a roundtable here. We're each going to have 1 point as to what we expect and what we think is the key to the game. The Chiefs defense has been the reason that they're 7-2, the reason that they're in this position to they win out, if you win the rest of your games, you're going to be the AFC bye. Steve, let's start with you on the defensive side of the ball. What are you watching tonight?
I think the most important thing here tonight is going to be L'Jarius Sneed and how he matches up with AJ Brown. The Eagles still have a really good rushing attack, and they can really kind of run the ball against anybody whenever they want to. It's been down more recently, but I still think that they have the capability of doing that whenever they want. AJ Brown has been absolutely out of his mind this season. It's really with Justin Jefferson kind of being on the shelf. It's been Tyreek Hill and AJ Brown like making their case as like we're the best wide receivers in football. And
Right.
I think why I'm a little bit more worried about this matchup than even Tyreek Hill versus Sneed or Justin Jefferson versus Sneed or Keenan Allen versus Sneed, like these other matchups that we've seen where those are incredibly talented wide receivers that L'Jarius Sneed has found a lot of success against. He's doing it by being a really physical corner at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
And you can't really do that to AJ Brown. AJ Brown's just bigger, stronger, faster, more athletic than everyone that he plays against, basically. And I still assume that L'Jarius Sneed's going to try to play that type of like physical style against AJ Brown, but how it actually matches up and if he's able to find success doing that, I think is going to be a deciding factor in this game because AJ Brown's just that good. Like the same way we talk about Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown is in that ballpark and physically, like there's just not another wide receiver in the NFL who does everything and puts it all together the same way that AJ Brown does. So I'm going to be paying very close attention to that at the start of the game.
Much like Tyreek Hill, I just think AJ Brown's one of these players that, if you're not involved with this player and you look around the league, you're just like, how did a team trade that guy? And I know it worked out for the Chiefs. They were able to win the Super Bowl, but it's also worked out, in the flip side for the Eagles, where he is just one of the best weapons in the NFL. And you almost ask yourself, like, how did Tennessee not figure something out? Like, how were they not able to keep this guy in the building? So I know that this is probably the number one matchup that everybody's going to be watching, L'Jarius Sneed versus AJ Brown. And if he can hold him in check, the Chiefs are quite obviously going to be in a very good position to win. John, what's your point that you're looking at on defense?
Well, it's interesting that Steve brought that one up because I was thinking the biggest issue is going to be stopping Devontae Smith. And I say this because Spagnuolo made a point of saying that the Eagles really have two big time wide receivers on the team, and they were going to have to pay attention to stopping both of them. I wonder if in this particular game, for the reasons that Steve mentioned, Sneed may go against Smith, and they have some other plan against Brown.
Yeah.
Because they are going to try and focus on stopping both of these guys. So to me, I'd be interested to see what they do to stop Smith, either because they're going to flip things around for this game, and maybe bring out somebody like Joshua Williams, or because they've got to stop him just because, it to me, that's going to be an interesting part of this defensive performance.
Yeah, I think it does seem like they're going to try to get Sneed on Brown, but it can't happen every time, right? Like sometimes with subs and just the calls. And in that case, they're going to hope that Trent McDuffie. But I think there is going to be a little bit of mixing and matching in that regard. I figured that one of you guys would go L'Jarius Sneed versus AJ Brown, and so I had something else to watch. I thought this was interesting because we've been raving about just how good the Chiefs defense has been. But they're quietly not so great against the run. They're 4.5 yard. They're allowing 4.5 yards per attempt on the ground. And it doesn't help that Nick Bolton won't be in this game. I know that Drew Tranquill has had a nice year and he's been able to fill in for Bolton, but the Eagles rushing attack is very dangerous. You have DeAndre Swift at 4.5 yards per attempt. Jalen Hurts runs at about 3.5 yards per attempt. And some of that is wrong just because, or it's not true because a lot of these are just the 1 yard tush push that you're getting a rush yard for. But I think that's going to be a key. It's the Chiefs stopping the run, because as much as AJ Brown and Steve, as you were saying, is one of these impact wide receivers, one of the better receivers in the NFL, the Chiefs have kind of proven that they can handle the opposing team's best weapon through the air. And I just wonder, let's say if the Eagles were able to get like a 10-point lead early, and then they just start grounding and pounding, like similar to what the Broncos were trying to do with Javonte Williams. I just think DeAndre Swift could be this key for the Eagles in this game. We have seen what he's been able to do in a Philadelphia uniform, and everything I just said about, man, how could the Titans have traded AJ Brown? Just been by watching Swift, you kind of feel the same way about like the Lions trading Swift. And I know that Gibbs has been good for them, but then they could have saved the draft pick and done something else. But to me, DeAndre Swift, Steve, is somebody to watch in this game.
Yeah, and I think that is the biggest question mark, and that's why like I am legitimately worried that Nick Bolton's not going to be in this game, because this is the perfect game for Nick Bolton and like his style of play, because the Eagles offensively this season, they're still great. They can still put up a ton of points, but they have gotten off to these slower starts, and when you really watch them, like the way they get going is they'll just come out and say, we're going to run 9 times. Like we're just going to run back to back to back to back to back until you prove you can stop it. And then that opens things up downfield. And they start taking the shots to AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and all of that stuff. And that's what's scary about their rushing attack, is that they're not afraid to go out there and just run it 12 times on one drive. Like they will do it and they'll commit to it more than virtually any other offense in the NFL until you prove you can stop it. And that's been the Chiefs defensively. It's been their one Achilles heel, really. And I think this would be a perfect game for Nick Bolton to just showcase what he can do around the line of scrimmage and really try to slow down that rushing attack. But it's also worth mentioning that like Jalen Hurts is a little bit banged up and he hasn't been rushing as much, which I think has hurt the effectiveness of their running game. So I don't know if he's going to be 100% healthy, dealing with the knee injury that's kind of slowed him a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but that's another thing to monitor. But their rushing attack is definitely scary because they'll just lean into it. And if the Chiefs can't stop it, there's not anything you can do about it.
Yeah, and we have to just quickly talk about the brotherly shove, the tush push, whatever that you want to say. You know, talking to these guys in the locker room this week, the general messaging was almost like we're looking at it as everything in 9 in a sense. Like we know that we have to get it to 4th and 2, or they could be on their own 25 and they're picking that up, right? If it's 4th and 1 and they're not afraid, it's been so successful that they'll go for it at any point on the field, 4th and 1. So Justin Reed's whole point is like, we got to make sure that it's X and 2 all game long, which is again an ultimate advantage for the Philadelphia Eagles. They basically play in like a 9 yards where the rest of the league plays in 10. And so I just think avoiding that situation, preventing them from getting in position to use that play is really the only way to defend against it. And it seems like the Chiefs are very focused on first down and second down and just making sure that you make it tough. Negative plays will be huge. You know, if you're able to get a negative play and they can't even sniff the end one, you're going to be in a better position to win.
Well, I think it's actually X and 2, not X and 1. I mean, they're none of these tush bushes stop at a yard. They always get 2 or 3 yards, even if they only need 1. And I think if you look at the numbers, I covered this in my newsletter piece this week. Even at X and 2, they do extremely well. And I think that's going to have to part of I would normally say, let me put it this way. I would normally say, I don't care if they can run the ball, because if another team runs the ball against the Chiefs, they're just opening up the door to the Chiefs running all over them, scoring a lot more points than they can put up by running the ball all through the game. But in this case, because they have the ability to get first down so easily when they're at X and 2, I think the rushing attack really could hurt them. And I think Steve's got a good point there.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens on the defensive side of the ball. The Chiefs defense is as good as it's been in a really long time, but this is one of the taller challenges that they'll face all year. So we'll be watching closely to those 3 things. All right, let's switch it to the offensive side. And John, we'll start with you. When the Chiefs have the ball, what are you going to be eyeing?
Well, I've already mentioned the Richie James thing that I was thinking about. And I think Steve's point was really good. You mean they spent the bye week, figuring out a way to put Richie James in the offense. So my second point about that would be Kadarius Toney. If we believe that what they've been doing all year is figuring out a way to carefully, slowly work Toney into the offense, you know what? It's time for them to do something now, to put him out there on a more consistent basis and see what he can do. And if they're not going to put him out there in a game against the team they played in the Super Bowl last season, well, when are they going to do it? if are they just waiting for the postseason? That seems hard to believe. But I would expect them. This would be a game where we might see more of Kadarius Toney if they have in fact been making their plans to do that over the bye week. But I still, in the back of my mind, I'm still wondering about Richie James.
I don't completely completely disagree with you on Tony. And when you play a guy 7 snaps, in a game, how can he make any impact? Yeah, especially at the wide receiver position. And I think you have a good point. If you're not using him against the best possible opponent, when are you going to use him? Now, that being said, Jerick McKinnon plays 2 months a year. Like they
Right.
really start to play him more in December, right? He only gets he's been getting a couple touches here and there. And then it's almost like they reveal their secret weapon in December, January. So is it completely implausible to think like, okay, they're waiting for Tony for December, similar to McKinnon, I guess. Just on that point, and just to extend the wide receiver point, I agree with you on Tony. It'd be nice to see some stuff drawn up for him. Before the break, we saw that Rashee Rice led the room in snaps, and I hope that continues. This isn't my point, but I just hope that continues into the second half, because you can just see from an all-around standpoint, trust with the quarterback, what he can do yards after the catch. He's become a red zone targeted touchdown guy for Mahomes. He's matched with Travis Kelce in touchdown. So I just hope they continue to give Rashee Rice as much work as possible. Steve, let's go to your point on offense. What are you looking for?
Well, I think a lot of the same things that both of you just mentioned, like Tony, obviously, Rashee Rice continuing to build on his role. I would really like to see Jerick McKinnon heavily involved in this game, because they haven't been using him really. And I feel like this is the type of game where, coming off the bye, especially, where Andy Reid would just say, like, you're getting all of it. Like, I'm putting everything out there tonight because I want to beat the Eagles again. And I want to show that we are still the best team in football. But I think what this game ultimately is going to come down to for the Chiefs offense is just how the Eagles decide to play Travis Kelce. And, Andy Reid coming off the bye, is he going to be scheming things up for Travis Kelce specifically and finding ways to get him involved? Because, Kelce's coming off of a couple of quieter games by his standards. And I'll be really interested to see how the Eagles try to defend him, because it seems like they're going to have veteran cornerback Bradley Roby back in this game. He has been hurt, so he hasn't been available. So they've been starting a couple of rookies in the slot, and that's been the biggest issue, because we know Darius Slay and James Bradbury, talented outside corners, but they've had tons of issues at their slot cornerback spot this season. So Roby's better than the rookies that they were playing out there, but he still struggled over the last couple of years too. So I wouldn't be shocked if we saw, like, the Eagles try to put just safety Kevin Byard in there, or put Darius Slay or James Bradbury in there to try to match up with Kelce one-on-one, to try to give them a more advantageous matchup there. But Andy's got to be planning for things like that. And over the bye, you would think that he has diagnosed some of those things in film. So I think that's going to be a deciding factor. Like Travis Kelce, the Eagles have been pretty bad against tight ends this season. Jake Ferguson just had like 91 yards, a touchdown before the bye against them. So they just got to get him involved. He's got to have a big game tonight, I think, for the Chiefs to win on offense.
Yeah, just building on that point on Travis Kelce, this is an excerpt from our Arrowhead Pride Premier newsletter. If you're interested in more content from AP, from all of us over here, go to arrowheadpride.com/subscribe. But I'll give you a freebie here. And this is from Brandon Lee Gotten. He covers the Eagles for Bleeding Green Nation. And he said, and he agrees with Steve, the biggest concern is that the Eagles might not be able to stop Travis Kelce. Philly's defense is vulnerable in the middle of the field. Look no further than CeeDee Lamb, who lined up in the slot, and Jake Ferguson going off against the Eagles in Week 9. Lamb had 11 catches for 191 yards, while the Dallas Cowboys tight end Ferguson had 7 grabs for 91 yards and a touchdown. That's a Kelce. Those are Kelce lines. And if you're seeing guys like that, who, when you're playing the Cowboys, you're paying attention to CeeDee Lamb. You're paying attention to Ferguson, who's emerging here, with the Cowboys, and they're still able to damage them in the middle of the field. I think by extension to that, establishing the run will allow you to attack the Eagles in that fashion as well. And so that goes into my point as well. I just want to see them like not forget about Isaiah Pacheco, right? We shouldn't look up midway through the second quarter and him have 4 carries. That's not going to be a recipe for you to win this game against the Philadelphia Eagles. You got to keep them honest when it comes to using the run to open up the pass. And so I am asking Andy, I'm looking forward to the challenge of asking Andy to at least give Pacheco 7 to 8 carries, touches in quarter 1 and 2. You know, I'd love to get to halftime and see that Pacheco touch the ball 10 times, because I think if you get that, that's usually when the Chiefs offense is rolling here in a sense. All right, let's get to our game predictions for tonight. John, we'll go back to you. How do you feel like this game's going to end up?
Well, as I said in my prediction on arrowheadpride.com, I actually thought that I think I've kind of been going through what Steve has been going through. It's been too much time since the last Chiefs game to really we thought about it way too much. Earlier in the week, I thought, oh, this is going to be a 3-point game. I thought it was going to be like the point spread. But as time has gone on, I've become more convinced that this is going to be a defensive statement for the Chiefs. And they're going to hold Philadelphia under their normal range of scoring, but we're not going to see a big offensive production either, because that's just not what they're doing when they have a defense like this. I think one of the things we're not getting about the Chiefs is that they're not being very productive on offense because they don't have to be. They've got a really good defense.
Yeah.
So I'm saying we're looking at a 27-20 game.
Wow, 20 points for the Eagles. Steve, do you agree with that prediction?
I'm not that far off from where John is. And some of this is because I've just flip-flopped and changed my mind a dozen times over the last 15 days. But I do think, and it hasn't been talked about enough, and I'm sure our friends at Bleeding Green Nation have talked about it a ton, but I don't think Chiefs fans have talked about it enough. Like, the Eagles have a new offensive coordinator, and their offense hasn't been quite the same this year, despite the fact that they're 8-1, and despite the fact that, you know, AJ Brown's incredible, Jalen Hurts is incredible, Devontae Smith's a great player. Like, they're a really talented team. They don't have Dallas Goedert in this game. I would assume that's going to affect some things a little bit, but at the end of the day, they're still so talented offensively. They can put up points, but it's not quite the powerhouse that it was last year. And same thing goes for the Chiefs. So, like, I don't think we're going to get another repeat of the Super Bowl where there's just offense everywhere and they're totally unstoppable. I do agree with John that I think this is going to be more of a defensive game, and how both of these units adjust throughout the contest. And I'm going to come back to the thing that has been the most consistent part of the Chiefs all season, and that's the defense. Like, I truly think that all of my questions about how Snead's going to line up against L'Jarius Sneed, or this pass rush is going to get after Jalen Hurts against that dominant Eagles offensive line, like, I just think that people are still underrating how excellent the Chiefs defense has been this season. And I think this is a statement game for them to say, like, we do truly have the best secondary in football. Like, our defensive line can go toe to toe with any offensive line. And I do, at the end of the day, I think that's a statement. I think the offensive adjustments by Andy over the bye will have an impact. And I think the Chiefs will do enough to come out ahead in this game. So I've got them winning 27-24.
No Goddard is a big break for the Chiefs. And, you know, we should mention that as well. Much like Kansas City, they don't really have any Goddard-like players beyond him in the tight end room. So that allows you to, I think, put more attention onto these wide receivers. And when Goddard is in that mix, it's almost like a 3-headed monster instead of 2. So that's a pretty big break, I think, for KC. I think you guys are right to mention defense. You can't mention defense and think that this is going to be a defensive struggle without also mentioning that the weather is supposed to be terrible, right? Like, with the rainy and cold, I don't think it's necessarily going to be one of these high scoring type of games either. If it was an option to not predict a winner in this game, I would take that. I don't know who's going to win, but because I think they just stack up so well. Like, it could be one of these struggles that you see, like, who gets the ball, you know, late in the fourth quarter. Like, maybe the Eagles score with too much time left, and, like, you have their fan base really nervous looking at the clock. Same thing with Kansas City. Like, maybe Kansas City pulls ahead by 3 or something in the fourth quarter, and you're looking up and you're like, oh my God, you know, Jalen Hurts has, you know, 3-4 minutes here to score and take the lead back. I ended up kind of going along the same lines, both teams in the 20s. I have the Chiefs winning 27-23. But I am not confident about it at all. And I wouldn't be confident if I picked the Philadelphia Eagles. Like, I think these two teams just stack up really well. they played 100 times, I think both teams are probably winning around the 50 range. And so I'm giving the edge to Kansas City just because they're home. And I think with this weather having an impact, their defense to me is a little bit better than the Philadelphia Eagles. And, if it comes down to defense, you got to go with Kansas City this year. But again, wouldn't be stunned if I'm completely wrong on the Eagles. Find a way to do it, even without Dallas Goedert in the mix. But should be a fun game at Arrowhead Stadium. It's Monday Night Football. If you're not heading out to the game, you can catch it, I believe, on ESPN, right? Locally in KC. If you're heading out there, actually stay dry. We will have podcasts coming after the game this week. It's going to be a little bit different, I know, because of Thanksgiving, but we'll have the post-game podcast tonight. Have the updates for you at arrowheadpride.com. Right after the game into the night. And again, if you're interested in Arrowhead Pride Premiere, after every game, the morning of, we have a newsletter that goes out that explores, different things that are said about this game, turning points, so on and so forth. arrowheadpride.com/subscribe if you're interested in that. So, guys, thank you for joining me. For Steve Serta and John Dixon, this has been another edition of the Arrowhead Pride Editors Show. Enjoy the game.